Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce two heavyweight dudes in the jazz industry, and I'm doing the Mike Myers. I am not worthy to have these guys on my channel, but we did an interview with Nick a while ago, and Nick was pleased, so he was nice enough to bring in Ashley Kahn, the eminent jazz journalist, and above Ashley is Nick Phillips, the eminent producer and musician, raconteur. But let me do a proper little thing here. Nick Phillips, a Grammy Award winning producer, jazz consultant, educator, and artist coach, and the producer of the Sonny Rollins, which we're speaking about here, Way Out West box, Go West, as well as many other exceptional craft boxes. And below him, in the striped shirt, from where are you? You're in New Jersey, Ashley?
Yes, yes.
You're in New Jersey. Nick, you're in LA?
No, I'm in Northern California.
Oh, you're in California, and I'm in the polluted skies of Greenwich Village. But we have celebrated writer Ashley Kahn. Ashley Kahn is an American music historian, journalist, and producer. His most, and I have to do this, his most critically acclaimed books have been on Kind of Blue and A Love Supreme, as well as The House That Train Built, the story of Impulse Records. He's written many liner notes, for which he has earned 3 ASCAP Deems Taylor Awards and a Grammy for his album notes to the John Coltrane release, offering live at Temple University. And he won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Jazz Journalists Association. Wow. Thank you guys for being here to discuss this amazing box set with the alligator finish. I don't know if you guys can see it there, but the finish on this thing is just off the charts.
Yeah.
And the spine,
skin. It's rattlesnake skin, actually.
Yeah, and the spine, the little crafting looks like Deutsche Grammophon. So a sure sign of quality. So I have specific questions for each one of you about this set, and general questions, but right up front, this is a Bernie Grundman mastered from the original tapes product. What else should we know about the technical aspects of this release?
Well, yes, so Bernie mastered directly from the original analog tapes, including the alternate takes. Those were assembled onto a reel from session reels to master from that. So it's all analog for the vinyl edition of this project. 180 gram vinyl, manufactured at RTI. So it just sounds phenomenal. Bernie's an amazing mastering engineer, and he actually worked with Les Koenig in the mid 60s. That's kind of where he learned how to master, working on some remastering of some contemporary projects. So there's a direct connection there as well.
That's really great. And it's a beautiful set. The reproductions are just gorgeous. And my first question before I open these up, would they have of course they would, but you have to ask yourself, the original colors, the black and yellow.
Right.
And the covers look great, contemporary leaders, alternate takes, which for some reason I thought was a different cover. These have all been reissued in a million different ways, and everything from weird Spanish labels to probably deluxe Chad Kassem editions. But also cool, it has a small booklet, which is unusual. And behind the booklet is a quote from Sonny Rollins, and on the other side are like the original liner notes, or more like
that's actually a release sheet. It's a reproduction of a contemporary records release sheet.
Oh, release sheet. Wow, very cool. And the booklet has all kind of great photos and top, front to back with Ashley's liner notes and interviews. So Ashley, you actually spoke with Sonny Rollins for this set.
Yes, I did.
What was that like? What's his mood like, and how does he look back on this recording?
Well, this is kind of what you were saying, this is very familiar territory for him. And of course, I was talking to him at the same time that Aidan Levy was obviously dealing with him on his biography, which has now come out. And what I'm very happy to say is that all these efforts were complementary. They really worked in tandem. And that, Sonny, whose pulmonary issues prevent him from performing anymore, it's hard to think of it, but it's almost 10 years now that we have not seen him out and about and performing.
Mm.
So his time and his kind of energy, he's able to pour it into these kind of look backs and what he had to share. First of all, I got to tell you that, it was the first time we had been speaking since the pandemic had started. So the first 20 to 25 minutes was, how are you doing? Are you okay? What's going on? Where's your head at? Where's your heart at? It was that kind of conversation. So we caught up very much on a spiritual level first. And then he kind of opened up the door to, what for him was a very, very special moment in his life, not only musically, but personally, because he had never been to California. He had never experienced Los Angeles. And the result of that was not only this wonderful relationship with one of the very few producers, I think, Les Koenig, who he really to this day speaks of with much fondness, but he fell in love and he got married for the first time. He fell in love with a model and a dancer out there,
Wow.
and she came back with him, and it didn't quite work out,
Huh.
but it just kind of shows you how new and exciting and sexy and everything about California was for him, and that he played into that. He played off of that energy, and he was able to do one of his most memorable albums, Way Out West, and then come back with another approach that's a little bit more cerebral, and goes back to the standards, of his youth. Actually, they both deal with standards, but the second one is more kind of focused on that idea. And hearing Sonny explain it in his own way was one of the whole reasons I do what I do, which is
Yeah.
allowing the musicians to speak for themselves and explain their music and add depth to it, give us the backstory, etc.
And all that information, the best bits are in these liner notes.
Oh yeah,
That's really exciting. What year was Way Out West recorded?
That was 57,
that's 57. Yeah.
March of
Wow.
57.
That I had never thought about the whole idea of that's when California was exploding as this incredible place to be. And and it's amazing because he has Ray Brown and Shelly Manne, two such incredibly iconic musicians, the perfect guys for those records. And I asked Nick before you came on, um, why do you think it is this? I work at the Jazz Record Center on one day a week, as I have for many years, and I think Way Out West must be his most popular recording, even though in my own opinion, it's not his greatest record. But why is it, if you agree, why is it his most popular record?
I don't know. Most popular, greatest, most lasting, most enduring.
Best selling.
I hate to think about music that way, and I think most
Mm.
musicians do too. And the reason why is this: that especially with people like Sonny Rollins, we're talking about an ongoing story. And it's sort of like saying, my favorite chapter from this book is and it's like, well, yeah, that's great, but don't you need chapters 1 through 5 and then 7 through 12 to complete the whole book? You know, and that's what I hear again and again when I do interviews that are kind of album focused. The classic response that I remember is Jackie McLean telling me about Kind of Blue. He goes, that should be a doorway in, and then you continue to understand the rest of Miles's story. So I'm not looking at it this way. I'm looking
Mhm.
at it as one of the most important points along the curve, and these two albums and the alternate takes define a time, a very specific place, a very specific mood and spirit, and a great friendship, a friendship that endured even after Les and Sonny weren't going to be working together again. You know, the one thing about this moment, too, Ken, that I think is very important is the kind of freedom that Sonny was feeling at the time. And a big part of it, of course, was getting himself healthy, back on the straight and narrow. and another part of it was still that vigor of youth that was with him.
How old was he when
And
he cut that record?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
26. He was
26.
26.
And also not being done with the Prestige contract. So all of this to him was this kind of combined freedom. This he was a free agent. He
Hmm.
was free to open up his heart and fall in love, which he did, and he was able to experience this new, the new promises and ideas that were fresh and I mean, L.A. was the new frontier. California was the new exciting frontier in 1950s.
Yeah, I
And
think people, it's
additionally,
hard for them to understand that. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just on the topic of freedom, musically speaking, Way Out West represents a certain kind of freedom, a harmonic freedom, because without a chordal instrument like guitar or piano, as Sonny would say, feeding the chords to him, he had the freedom to infer the harmony based on his melodic development and all of that kind of stuff. So it was also a very freeing experience for Sonny, musically speaking.
Hmm. Can you guys address I mean, you're talking about points along a career. One of my favorites is probably Blue Note 1542, which is such, I mean, he had made so many amazing records, but these records are back to back and they sound so radically different. Was that planned? Did it just happen? Why is that?
I think you just held up alternate takes and
Oh,
But you
yeah,
mean the two primary albums,
oh,
Way
because
Out
the back
right.
of
I just
alternate
want to make
takes,
sure I know which one
right, the back of
1542.
alternate takes has a Way Out West sort of photo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I meant the difference between that and Way Out West. Sorry, but they're radically different records. Do we know
Well,
how
they
that
were
sort of
also
transpired?
almost 2 years. They were also almost 2 years apart.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And Contemporary Leaders was first.
No,
Oh,
Way Out West was first.
Way Out West was first. Way Out West was almost like like a loose, informal gesture compared to the amount of work that went into Contemporary Leaders.
Really? How
It
so?
was done way late. It was done at like the wee
3
hours of the
a.m.
morning at 3 a.m. It was done when both Ray Brown and Shelly Manne had come off of a gig, and so had Sonny. Sonny was in town playing with Max, and so the three of them got together after they had finished their gigs, and they were still going. You know, so they had the benefit of that kind of post gig energy, kind of like buzzing through them. But
Hmm.
then they came from separate gigs. I love that idea, just sort of colliding in what was essentially the mailroom of contemporary records at the time. They just pushed the stuff back and became the recording studio, you know. Whereas, obviously Contemporary Leaders was very well thought out. It required a bigger group, required a lot more planning, scheduling, deciding on material, what material they were going to do, order of solos, etc., etc.
Was
And
Sonny living out?
to
Oh,
that point,
go ahead,
Way
Nick.
Out West was recorded in one session, that one, basically all night session. And Sonny Rollins and the Contemporary Leaders was recorded over the course of 3 days.
Yes.
Wow. Was Sonny living out there for the entire production periods of these records?
He was passing through is probably the best way to describe it, Ken. I mean, back in those days, you didn't just come into town for a gig. You came in town for usually a 2-week run. So living, yeah, I mean, you're living, you've got free nights off, you've got mornings and afternoons to go shopping or hang out or visit friends, and Sonny did all of that enough to, as I said, meet someone and fall in love to the point that, he brought her back east.
Can,
But go ahead.
can you all, since this is the contemporary records, the for me as a listener, and I'm an audiophile, the contemporary records, they all sound amazing and they all sort of sound similar. They're extremely consistent and uniform. Roy Dunan compared to someone like Rudy Van Gelder, whose records also sound great, but sonically they're all over the place. Maybe he has a lot more records. But how did Dunan achieve that consistency in like the warehouse? I mean, what's your insight into that and the amazing sound he's got in those records?
One of the things I've learned is that of course, they use really high quality microphones. And because it was such an intimate space, everyone was close mic, much like the Rudy Van Gelder approach in terms of close miking. But they also limited the signal path. They didn't do a lot of processing. I mean, pretty much, straight from the mic to the cable to the preamp to the tape recorder. And one of the interesting things about Roy Dunan, in my opinion, people call him kind of the Rudy Van Gelder of the West Coast, but listen to his piano sound, and that's one area where I feel like Rudy kind of missed the mark a little bit.
His records
also
are so
bass.
Yeah, they're natural, they're flat, things don't go crazy, you don't hear reverb splashing.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Roy Dunan never pre-printed reverb when he recorded.
Really?
So drier sound, yeah. Sometimes they would add reverb in mastering, but never while recording. So the contemporary records just have a real natural, organic sound about them.
And who cut the lacquers and where were the original records pressed? Is that stuff we even know, or it must be in a note somewhere?
I don't know. I could research that. I wouldn't know that off the top of my head.
But they are. I mean, they really, really do sound wonderful. They're so consistent. I'm curious, were there things, Ashley, that Sonny said that I'm sure many things surprised you, but unusual things that added to your knowledge of this collection and where his head was at then?
Trying to think of what surprised me. Still working in the music business, starting with that. Sorry, ask your question again.
I'm curious if there were certain recollections he had about that period that maybe you didn't already know that that just added to the whole.
I got to say that his take on things is so straightforward. He does not interpret or look at the world in layers or anything. He's very straightforward kind of guy, and spiritual as well, and very, very much looking at why people do what they do and why he's doing what he's doing. I think that I've you have to read the interview, because I did everything I could not to interpret it and to catch the flow of his kind of logic and ideas. He speaks for himself in a very, very open-hearted and very revealing way. I think the idea of surprise might be more just that, we look upon this as classics. To them it was another Wednesday, or another Thursday. I mean, this is them going to work. This is what he did and what he did up to 2014, when he retired. But Sonny's, does not look upon this. He never used the word classic, he never used the word masterpiece,
Wow.
to his credit, this is who he wanted to, this is what he wanted to share at that moment in time. And Les Koenig gave him the ability to do that,
Did you speak to him in person or on the phone?
On the phone.
Oh, you said it was during the pandemic?
This was still, when the pandemic was going on.
Wow. And he's somewhere in Manhattan?
No. He's up in the Woodstock area.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Manhattan
No, he
gets
moved up
crazy.
there with his wife Lucille quite a while ago, and he's been a member of that community for a bit. However, with Lucille gone and then the pandemic, you can imagine he was somewhat isolated, and so I don't want to assume to say that he was so happy to hear from me, but he certainly was very generous with his time and memories.
That's great. We think of, and I hate to do the either or, the comparison thing, but I think it's easier for people who are watching my channel and considering what records are pushed and available in the jazz marketplace. I
Sure.
think people know a lot about John Coltrane, thanks to your book for one thing. But if we talk about Sonny, who I believe, I could be wrong, but came a little bit before Train, what are his real innovations as a saxophonist, Nick?
For me, he's always creative. No two solos sound the same on the same song on any given night. And if you listen to his alternate takes that are included in this collection, you hear that he's constantly innovating. And one of the things that always stands out to me about Sonny Rollins, jazz improviser, is his solos always tell a story. He can develop a motif and a theme and work it through all these different variations like no other improviser I've ever heard.
Yeah,
Ashley?
I absolutely agree. I think that the one thing that is really Sonny's signature, one of his signatures anyway, is he's a quote-o-matic. He's quoting melodies from from everywhere, and he has this unbelievably deep encyclopedic, retrieval system, for melodies that he heard maybe once, and it was in a movie, and it was a kind of, here and then gone tomorrow type of thing. And Coltrane was like that too, but Coltrane was so focused on the, shall we say, the nuts and bolts of what he was doing, that his solos are kind of recreating a new world, a whole new vocabulary. Whereas Sonny kind of is taking the world and encompassing it in every solo that he does. So you will have 15, 16, 17 quotes all within a 2.5 minute, period. But that's just some of the details. The ceaseless creativity and the fact that he is so compelling in what he's doing and the way that he's creating constantly is Coltrane was like that too. It was like the way Elvin, who played with both of them, by the way, recorded with both of them, Elvin Jones described it. He goes, it was like looking at this mountain of ideas and ideas constantly flaking off of it, but there was a mountain, that much substance to it, and to
Right.
be to be witnessing and to catch Sonny live at this period, I would give good money if I could go back and experience that, him
Yeah.
and Coltrane, etc., when they were really at the peak of their powers.
It's funny because I sometimes have the impression, because Sonny's jocular and having a fun time on this record, you can hear it. He's extroverted. Then I think back to Blue Note 1542, where some of the solos, he sounds like a computer, and some of the they're just bizarre, cerebral, angular things he plays are kind of shocking. As where Coltrane, for me, always seems on us, even when he's playing like really fast or he's really, really free, there's a consistency there. Do you think it was Sonny, just as far as personalities, a more extroverted fellow than Coltrane, or is he, or by comparison? I wonder.
Nick?
It's a question.
I
I don't
wouldn't know.
know.
I mean, they both have haven't had a spirituality at their core, and they're both these kind, gentle human beings.
Absolutely.
But they both also have a very exuberant style of playing typically as well. I don't know. It's comparing apples to oranges. They're
Yeah,
both
yeah. I'm just curious. I
jazz
mean,
musical geniuses that play the saxophone, and both of them have created this amazing, lasting body of work that's going to be continue to be influential 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, I think. So,
Well, I think what you're kind of referring to, Ken, is this kind of balance between the math and the emotion,
that's an
the
excellent way to look at it.
science and the
technique,
sentiment,
Excellent.
and both of them were, obviously explorers, fellow travelers in this post-bop world that we're talking about, and came out of being deeply influenced by Charlie Parker and his brethren, you know, and then deciding where to take this language further, how to develop it. And they both found their own ways.
Hmm.
I would say that the extreme experimental charge that was driving Coltrane, was slightly different and kind of propelled him. But it's not like Sonny didn't do it himself. I mean, East Broadway Rundown, on Impulse is a good example.
Alfie,
You know,
masterpiece. Yeah,
exactly.
just a
So
masterpiece.
he could handle it all, but Sonny, I think, by the 60s kind of finds himself. And what changes is the kind of background rhythmic aspect and who's playing with him and what the context is, but the heart stays the same, his sound, his approach. And part of that is being invented and created right here on these contemporary recordings. So what we're hearing is a kind of galvanizing of Sonny's musical identity more than any other point. And I think the reason why we can talk to the Blue Note albums of this period and Prestige and Contemporary is that he allowed himself to kind of share this moment, when he was getting himself together with different labels. What's interesting, in listening to you guys talk about it, and what I've been learning is just how different engineers and different, recording approaches, techniques, technology, kind of changed it around a little bit. But I think that's why it kind of stands out for us that way, is that his, you know, sort of becoming himself, at that point, all happened around the same time, late 50s.
Mm. And if I may, Nick, if I may ask Ashley about a specific Impulse record, this is off our course, but
that's fine.
can you shed a little light on Alfie? Because that's such an incredible record, such a perfect record. It's such an unusual cast of characters to have come together to make this masterpiece. I played that record for a lot of people who weren't aware of it. I don't know if maybe it wasn't reissued well, but what's the little backstory and how that came to be, Alfie?
Well, there's a whole mishmash of stuff that was going on. He was going to record it in London. He had his band with him, and he was playing at Ronnie Scott's, and there was all this material there, and he wasn't allowed to because of union rules in the UK that he had to record with local musicians, with UK musicians, even if they were looking at the music for the first time on the studio date, And then of course he comes back to New York, and they say, you know what, let's get together with Oliver Nelson and put together a band, And that's what eventually came out. But the music that was recorded in England ends up in the movie. The album itself is a New York studio recording with um, New York players and Oliver Nelson arrangements, etc. So what you're hearing when you're seeing Michael Caine and the various other actors is what Sonny put down in the UK, and of course he recorded his own version of what was supposed to be the theme song, but then through the machinations of Hollywood and the film industry in general, the vocal version of the a vocal version of the Burt Bacharach classic ends up on the in the movie, not the Dionne Warwick hit version. So, if you're still following, it's total confusion.
Wow.
What we have
So
are, totally separate, almost uninvolved with each other kind of projects. The Impulse album is its own thing. That was done for a recording, for release by Impulse, with one of Impulse's, top in-house, people, arranging and putting it together and writing the music. And that was, Oliver Nelson.
so Sonny cut a version of the Bacharach tune?
No. But there was another tune, and I think it was just called Alfie, that was supposed to be the theme for the movie. Then the Burt Bacharach tune came out, or came into the picture, and I'm forgetting who sings on the version that's in the movie.
Lulu? Is it Lulu? No, who is it? Is it Dionne Warwick? I forget it's Dionne Warwick.
It's not Dionne. Dionne was, just the radio hits. What you hear in the movie is Sonny with British players, with the British rhythm section.
And has that been released as a record, I wonder, in the UK? Wow. That's freaky. See, I've never had anybody explain that to me like this. Because I always thought to myself, the album I know and love is Alfie by Sonny Rollins is not in that movie.
No. It's a separate project, and it's great, but it's unto itself. That music, per se, those recordings are not in the movie.
Well, thanks for clearing it up, because I always wondered, that's one of my favorite Sonny Rollins records. But if
I
anything,
might have just added to the confusion.
Yeah, you deepen the rabbit hole. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys know, and I just have a couple other questions. Do you know that movie? It's a British movie. It's based on some Shakespearean thing. Mingus is in it. Dave Brubeck, Patrick McGowan. It's a wild movie. You know the one I'm sure you've seen it.
The description of it is like triggering something, especially the Patrick McGowan reference.
I think it's called All Night Long. McGowan plays drums in the thing.
Right.
And they're meeting up. That would be a cool record to put out.
This almost sounds like one of those late 60s films that was actually more a fever dream than anything else.
A Dennis Hopper production.
Right, or what was the name of the guy who did the film director? Otto Preminger did one or two that were like acid trips.
Or like Zachariah with Elvin on drums out in the desert.
My God, the anti-Western.
Yeah, wearing all white.
Yeah.
What a crazy story.
And I think the band that he kicks off the stage, I think that's James Gang. And so that would mean that what's his face, Joe Walsh is in it too.
How crazy is that?
I know, right? That was a moment.
Yeah. Well, finally, and this is a really general, sort of broad question: where does Sonny fit in today's jazz scene? I mean, today's jazz scene is such an open question of what's happening in contemporary jazz. But where does he? And I know he's not actively playing, but what is his role in today's jazz scene?
I think he continues to be an influence by on anyone that wants to be a creative improviser. I mean, that's his lasting influence. I think regardless of the generation.
I think he's definitely seen as one of the kind of, if musical ideas and if you're a creative, individual in the world of music, and you're going to try and find out who you are and try and establish your identity, it helps to have a compass, and one of the primary paths on that, points on that compass, north, east, west, or south, is, if you're doing saxophone, is Sonny as much as it's Coltrane. And so that kind of difference between Sonny and Coltrane still is there today. two different approaches. And you can almost, kind of trace the lineage from, say, Coltrane through a whole bunch of saxophonists and generations, one after another, to today. And same with Sonny, And if you listen to a pardon me, let's try that again, Joshua Redman or Ravi Coltrane, I hear more Sonny sometimes in Ravi's playing than his father.
It's funny.
But
Yeah, I
there's this extended kind of shadow, and people have to learn it, but also learn to play away from it and find themselves. And I think that Sonny casts one of the deepest of those shadows.
you can trace that line from Sonny to people like Berganzi, I guess, to people like Michael Brecker, straight to somebody like Chris Potter, who's such a powerful player. Yeah, they're all still alive.
Well, it's a standard that was set, Ken. That this instrument in this context can be this deeply expressive, and that you can bring in this much preparation and ideas and consistent creativity can be expressed on this instrument. And the most powerful of these players almost use up the instrument, and the challenge becomes, how can I play beyond that? What can I do with this instrument that goes beyond? And Sonny is certainly one of those who's like most responsible for thinking about it that way.
Yeah, today's jazz players have such an enormous task when you look at what has gone before them, and now we're living in this golden age of reissues thanks to Nick or people like Joe Harley and Don Was. I mean, the stuff that's coming out, I personally prefer the sound of the earlier pressings, but man, it's a wealth of incredible riches that people like both of you are so responsible for putting out. It's an incredible thing, but boy, it puts the onus on a young jazz player. It really does.
Yeah, I blame Nick for all of this, actually.
I'm glad you said it, not me. Exactly.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah, someone's got to take the blame. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for speaking with me. This has been a real pleasure and eye-opening, and I'm sure my viewers are going to love it. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.